Hey there, and welcome back to another Disney video. And today I want to talk about something a little bit different, something outside my usual wheelhouse of franchises. A show called The Mysterious Benedict Society. And I don't really even remember how I found this show. One day, it was just sitting there on Disney Plus, and since I had nothing better to do, I figured, what the hell? Why not? Let's give it a go. And honestly, coming into it, I didn't expect much from it at all. A live-action kids show made for a streaming service based on a book I'd never heard of? It didn't inspire much confidence in me whatsoever. And so I thought, I'll give it a chance, but I'm expecting I'll drop it after a couple of episodes. But of course, as I seem to be finding lately, my first impression actually turned out to be quite wrong, and instead of disliking this thing, I actually found it to be rather charming. Is it the greatest show that's ever been made? Nah, probably not. But it's still fun, and it had a lot of exciting twists and turns. But before we go any further, I suppose we'd better talk through what this show's all about. Released in 2021, The Mysterious Benedict Society tells the story of Mr. Nicholas Benedict, a wealthy and eccentric genius with narcolepsy who recruits 4 children, Rainey Muldoon, George Washington, and yes, that is his actual name, Kate Wetherall and Constance Contraire, who are all child prodigies who score highly in a set of tests that will supposedly get them into the prestigious Boatwright Academy. Of course, this is actually all a scam, and instead they're recruited by Benedict to infiltrate a different school called The Institute, which is run by the mysterious and ominous Dr. Curtin, who also turns out to be Nicholas's twin brother, Nathaniel, and who's supposedly responsible for the global crisis, the emergency, and who continues to exacerbate this by infiltrating the public subconscious using a special machine which is powered by the minds of intelligent children at the school. And this machine allows him to plant thoughts and ideas into the public and just generally cause chaos. Of course, the kids and Benedict and his associates all team up to take him down, and it's revealed that he's salty that his brother got adopted and yet he was left behind at the orphanage, which that actually really sucks. And they destroy his machine, and he escapes, setting up plot threads for a second season, which is slated to be released in September this year. So, all in all, a pretty solid storyline, some interesting twists and turns, some action, cliffhangers, funny moments. Nothing revolutionary, but a solid show nonetheless that really does have a lot going for it. But let's try to dig a little bit deeper than that, both the good and the bad, and start to unpack what this show's really all about. Okay, so we'll start with the acting. It can be pretty hit or miss. I think for the most part, the adults were largely good. I never really sat there cringing at anything they were saying, or their emotions, or their expressions, and Tony Hale as both the Benedict brothers was especially good. And in many ways, I reckon he actually carried the show. Without him, I think the flaws in the acting become a lot more obvious, because I don't know, I didn't really rate the child acting here. And I'm not hating. After all, child actors are often quite hit or miss. It's not their fault. They're young and still learning. But it doesn't suddenly make it more watchable, especially when there are numerous scenes where there are no adult characters to bounce off of. It's just the kids. And those ones, they are usually where things start to drag and the quality begins to dip quite a lot. Mostly, I just think it's the emotion that's lacking in these sequences. They really do look and sound like they're reading a memorized script as opposed to embodying the characters. And at times, this can get very distracting. The writing, the script, they're all solid, but then at times it feels like it's being straight up massacred by some less than stellar performances. But then on the other hand, you do have some of these older cast members who carry a lot of the scenes they're in. And in their interactions with the younger cast members, they do help to improve their performances as well. It's just that the further you get into the show, and the more intense the plot gets, you want better acting. But by this point, there are more and more scenes which are just the kids, no adults. And at times it really hampers the narrative being spun, as their delivery is just not always believable. And so you find yourself yearning for another non-plot relevant scene where the adult characters who are camped across the lake get up to some silly shenanigans and worry about the kids. So child actors, they don't really live up to expectations. But for the most part, that's okay, because there are enough positive aspects of the series to balance that out. And one of these positives, and perhaps the most important, is the narrative structure and flow. It just works. Everything flows so seamlessly. And whilst the start of the story is a little bit slow, and you need to slog through the tests and the different introductions for all the different characters, and so it really does take a couple of episodes for the plot to really get going and for the important stuff to begin, after that, the plot progresses in a straightforward and engaging way. There's little filler to pad out the episodes and extend the storyline beyond what's necessary, and everything feels concise and streamlined. There just isn't much fat in the show. I mean, aside from that early plotting start, but even that's probably necessary. They don't really have much of a choice in that because, 1, they're trying to be faithful to the book itself, and 2, they needed to set these things up so you can have that rapid plot progression later on. And thus, you'll be able to have a really well-paced and gripping second half of the season. And so, if you can make it through that brief initial slog in the first episode or two, it really improves on all aspects, interweaving the mystery of the Institute with key flashbacks that flesh out the characters and give hints as to the motivations of the villain and the future of the story. Furthermore, beyond just the pacing of the narrative itself, the story is actually just a lot of fun. It's clearly aimed for younger audiences, and so it isn't too mature in style and substance, but at the same time, it's quirky and strange and weird, an outlandish sort of setting. One that's reminiscent of our own, but with little differences that make it sort of feel almost uncanny valley at times. Like you see this world that in parts is so similar to the one we know, and yet these key differences make you feel a bit on edge, a bit unsettled. Subtle differences that make the world feel odd and wrong. And this ramps up the tension, and everything feels a bit more gripping. It's kind of like the effect that a series of unfortunate events had, where there's this weird, sort of dreary and disconnected energy that permeates the entire world and makes everything feel so bleak and depressing. And yet also, it keeps you invested and interested and on the edge of your seat. And on top of that, beyond the tone, the actual content of the story has their unsettling air presented in the form of numerous mysteries that the protagonists need to unravel. What is the Institute? Why is Benedict's twin evil? What's the emergency? Why are people's minds getting erased by this man? What is he using these kids for? Why are some of the kids a little bit weird? Are they being mind controlled? It's kind of creepy, and it has a lot of interesting narrative twists and turns and really grips you from the get-go. And so, whilst the show's probably not going to be winning any major awards anytime soon, it's still a very fun watch, and I'm eagerly awaiting to see how Season 2 pans out. It gets you invested in the characters and in the story, to the extent that I think you're able to forgive a lot of its flaws. And for what it is, I think that's all you need. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be fun. And I think it succeeds in that. And so now, that's the end of the video. And I would like to say that these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the Mysterious Benedict Society if you've seen it? Like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.